Welcome to this Roll for Crit review and get ready to fight as we take a look at Level 99's Exceed fighting system. This game was actually sent to us, the Street Fighter one, along with this nice playmat. But we actually had one from their first season and one from their second season. They're actually pretty much, these seasons are pretty much like sets. They have their own little core theme going around it, the third one being Street Fighter. So we thought we'd just take them all together and give you a review of our opinion on the game in general and each season, which one we like. We do have some bonus fighters here, which we do like the characters of, but we won't count them because they're probably hit or miss in terms of fighting them.
Right, and we also haven't experienced every character in all the seasons, so we're kind of just talking about generally our feelings about the system itself and some of the differences.
Yeah, we thought it best to look at each box separately because if you're looking for every character, you probably should look online when people have tested it way too much. We didn't mix them when we fought, but we play with each character, so we'd be like, if you bought this one box, what our thoughts were.
That being said, if you don't know, Exceed is a two-player fighting game. There's a tag team mode, but essentially it's designed for two players head-to-head. It's a card game, and each player is going to have a deck of cards that represents a character. And within that deck, there are going to be some generic cards, as well as some specific cards to their character that only they have. We're using the Street Fighter cards for an example, but the different sets have different art, different characters, different styles to them. The way it works is you have this mat right here, or if you don't have the mat, you would just set up a kind of a fake board.
Yeah, using these cards.
Using those cards, so each card is a space. And these are your two characters as they are. And on your turn, you will have a hand, max hand size is 7. You'll have somewhere around there depending on how you're playing. And you could play a card for its ability down here, which is called a boost. Or you can use it later on in a strike, which is an attack. We'll get to that later. There's a system called force in the game. Force is basically your currency. And the way that you generate force is either by discarding cards or by spending cards from your gauge area. You'll get cards in there if you manage to hit your opponents with them, possibly with some other effects as well. So the way that attacking works, when you strike, you will choose a card from your hand, and both players will put face down those cards. Then you simultaneously reveal them. Then you're going to compare a bunch of different stats. So first and foremost, you have speed. In this case, you have a speed of 6 minus 4, so you would get to do all your things first. Then you look at the power. That's how much damage you're going to try to do to them. I may be able to soak some of that up with armor or with guard, which has to do with stunning the character. And I skipped one, which is very important. There you go. There's some of those stats. I skipped range. That's really the first thing you got to look at, because if you're not in range, you can't hit them. So this is range 1 to 2. You would need to be 1 to 2 spaces away for that attack to go through.
Of course, this is a card game where they have their own text boxes, so make sure to read that. For example, that can't hit unless range 1, but before you do anything, you do that. So that can move you in enough distance. Some have after, some have when they hit.
Yeah, there's all kinds. There's keywords, there's triggering effects, etc. And so you decide who hits. Like I said, if you manage to hit, you get to put it in your gauge area, which you can use for special abilities later on. And these are your life meters. You start with 30, and when you get a player down to 0, they're out of the game, and you win.
Gauge can either be used to transform your card. Every character card from all 3 seasons can flip over. And they have sort of a stronger power. Usually they have their own power, but a stronger version of the power. They can also be used for their special cards, like this one. They'll have a cost up on the top, in which they're usually very strong, so you have to wait for that right moment. And then each set may have some other things. For example, the Street Fighter one can make an attack critical, which pretty much makes it have some bonus cards depending on their ability or the ability of some of the cards they have.
There's some other little things in there. Like I said, each character is going to be a little bit different, so you may be able to use force for different special abilities. You can also use it to move generally. Sometimes you can push or pull people. There's some more stuff going on, but those are the basics. Is your striking, you're attacking, you're trying to hit each other and then bounce back and make sure they can't hit you at the end of the day. So there's 3 seasons, like we said. Each one has its differences, but they're mostly pretty similar. Where do you want to start in terms of talking about our feelings on the mechanics of the game and how it works?
Well, I think we should start from season 1 up. I mean, that
makes
seems to be
perfect sense to me. So season 1, I think, I'll just tell you going into this, my biases and opinions. I really really am a big fan of BattleCon. I think we both are, which is Level 99's other fighting game system card game, which uses a pretty similar setup, has some similarities in terms of the stats and how they work and how they compare to each other with the striking and the range and speed and power. I also like Pixel Tactics, which is another Level 99 head-to-head card game. The reason I mentioned it at the top is because going into it, my mindset was, this seems cool, but as someone who likes BattleCon already, I don't know that I really need this game in my life. I think that it seems similar enough that I don't know that this is really going to blow me away. But having said that, after we played quite a few games of it, my expectations were exceeded. And while it does have a lot of similarities on the surface, the way the game plays back and forth, I think, is different enough. And I really did enjoy. I think it's a bit simpler. I think there's the biggest difference is that in BattleCon there is very, very little information that is not open, because you can see what your opponents have played in the past, which you can do here as well. But I feel like there's a bit more hidden and randomness involved. I think it plays a bit quicker, a bit simpler. I really, really, really liked it quite a bit. Just the overall experience, not going into which season I liked the best.
Right. Overall, I mean, as I said, I did enjoy a lot, and we'll go a little bit more of why certain seasons more than others. Mm-hmm. So the first one was, as I said, the first one, if you look behind us, it's the smaller box. And the reason why you don't see them in these nice tuck boxes is because they were not included in the core. But I know there's a print and play. Not print and play, print and make, I guess.
Print and
for your
hold.
Own boxes, and maybe they'll sell some online. I didn't know if I saw they confirmed that or not, but it has pretty much all the basic things. I think that's its thing. It's the first Exceed, so it didn't really have a unique keyword to it. Mm-hmm. And we chose this box. It was the first one we had with all these characters who I'm not going to try to pronounce. But we did enjoy them, but we felt like that certain characters seemed to be much more advanced. It seemed like the skill level was a bit more, I think, it moved a bit more between characters compared to the other sets. I think they were generally around, you knew how to work them, when this one's like very different to this, like in terms of how comfortable we were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in general, with a game like this, when there's that many characters, it's going to be a little tough. And one of the biggest aspects of the game is also knowing your deck and knowing your opponent's deck. So regardless of, even if it's a simple character to play, a lot of times you're going to find, if it's your first time playing someone, you maybe need a little bit of time to get yourself accustomed to that play style.
Like any kind of fighting game, if someone knows that they're a zoner and you don't, you're going to have a hard time trying to close that gap.
Yeah, bringing in that fighting lingo.
This one, probably, and this one too. But even Street Fighter didn't really have this. There is
Seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah, curling, especially with the foil cards. There's no foil in Street Fighter.
Yeah, we did not sleeve these, and you can tell because, there's a lot of that curling, warping, what have you of the cards, which is a bummer. If you have this set and you want to play it, you're really going to want to sleeve them.
Yeah, very early on.
To cut down on that. That is a shame. Season 2, we haven't touched on, I feel like really has the most unique mechanic that is unique to Season 2, which is the transformation ability. And that adds a thing where certain cards, instead of this boost, they have a transform. And maybe we'll take some of those out so you can see what they look like.
So, your character, which this entire theme was you became like crazy beasts or something. Mm-hmm. Some of their cards, instead of having the boost action that you mentioned before, have the transform. By either playing 2 copies of the same, or successfully landing an attack, instead of ending it to your gauge, it goes over to a transformation set, which pretty much gives you more cool abilities, which is really, really fun because all of a sudden you start stacking them and then all of a sudden you have all these additional effects.
Yeah, the other great thing is that those take away from the cost of your Exceed ability when you flip it. So they help in multiple ways. They're really, really nice to have. And that really does change the feel of the game quite a bit. Seasons 1 and 3 are pretty much feel the same with the exception of that one keyword, whereas this feels like a kind of more of a game changer.
Also, 2 of the ones in the set we have came with an extra card that goes, like, it's almost almost like their own little pocket worlds. Like I think one's Dreaming City and the other one's Wonderland.
Right, yeah, so that is in certain scenarios those will stay separate, so those characters are also very different. And again, we haven't experienced the other characters from other sets, so they may have their own gimmicks even though because I know from BattleCon a lot of those characters have very weird gimmicks that make them very different from others. Yeah.
And then finally the Street Fighter one, we already touched on the beginning because we were using that. Its big thing is the critical. Some characters, their ability is a critical, so you can sort of stack the critical. Others, it's just keeping track. Unlike the other two, their basic cards is this artwork, and it bugs me a little because some of them are playable characters, and you're like, oh, I have one of my character's own cards. No, that's one of the basics. Like, if you look at the other two, it's not the same art, but it's still very
it's generic. Whereas you could be playing Ryu and end up with a Chun-Li card, and it's a little bit confusing. Yeah, they all have slightly different art styles, which I actually like. We should mention the first two seasons. The first season is based on a property from Jasco Games.
This is interesting.
And season 2 is an original Level 99 property that is going to be its own standalone board game in the future. So
and then 3 is a video game.
And then 3 is the video game. So who knows what they're going to add in the future? And then they also have those weird promos like Shovel Knight. So there's a lot of interesting licensing mixing going on. So overall, definitely, I think we agree seasons 2 and 3 were stronger than 1.
That I enjoyed more, yeah.
Yeah, but still had fun with all of them, and I think because there's so many characters, so much variety, again, same thing as their other fighting card games from Level 99, there's a lot you can mix and discover on replaying it.
As the game itself, like even ignoring if you really are a Street Fighter fan, or in the future if you are a fan of 7th Cross.
7th Cross, right.
I do still thought the games had a lot of fun fighting mechanics, especially once you've learned them. They go by pretty quick, which is pretty nice.
Now we'll give you our crits and misses for the Exceed fighting system. First, crits. There is a wide variety of characters across all the seasons that provide players with plenty of depth and replay value.
Each season has its own fun theme and mechanics, which make them unique and fun. And if you're not sure if you're going to like that season, you can just buy a box of 4 characters instead of the entire season and just try it out for yourself.
There are multiple ways that you can play the cards from your hand or spend force points or gauge cards, so there are plenty of decisions for you to make on your turn. The strike system is intuitive, fast-paced, entertaining, and engaging for both players, even if it's not your turn. The game can take some time to adjust to, and there's certainly a danger of analysis paralysis, but in general, once you get used to the system, that it plays pretty quickly, probably around half an hour or less for each game.
We played through 3 core sets in essence, and once we really had the rules under our belt, it was really fun to just go, alright, we played this game, I want to try that character now. Now for the counter miss. This game has a nice quick playtime, and maybe because of that, if you make a mistake, it can feel much more punishing than in other games.
It's certainly advantageous to have a familiarity with the cards and play style of the different decks, so you're going to want to make sure that the people you're playing with have hopefully an equal skill level.
Component-wise, the first 2 seasons had a couple foil cards that really curled, much to our disliking, so you better sleeve those up fast. And the box for Season 1 is very disappointing compared to the other 2, especially since it doesn't have tuck boxes to separate your characters.
I'm very glad that they improved that for Seasons 2 and 3, but it is a bit disappointing to see the earlier ones next to them on your shelf.
Once again, we did keep this within their own seasons, but there are a lot of characters and there could be some balancing issues. Certain sets may be even better than others, so you might want to be careful about that when mixing.
We weren't able to play with every character that's available, but the general consensus seems to be that Season 1 had a bit more of a balance issue than other seasons. In general, I think when you have a game with this many characters, it's just inevitable that some are going to end up being stronger or weaker than others.
So we sort of hinted at that we were enjoying 2 and 3 a bit more than 1, but I think I want to ask now, what was your favorite of the 3?
Honestly, I think 3. Maybe part of it is because I really actually don't have an affinity for the Street Fighter games, but I do have some familiarity with those characters, and I thought the colors and the art on those was a little nicer, and it was kind of a simple back to basics like the first set. So I would encourage people to probably start with Season 3, then pick up something from Season 2, and Season 1 really only go back to if you decide you really love it and want to just buy all of them. Which I don't think Season 1 was bad, just I think those other two were definitely stronger.
Part of it is just the box. It's going to be easier for your collection.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, 2 is still, I really enjoyed the transformation mechanic. And I'm also very curious and excited to play whatever the 7th Cross board game is going to be.
Me too.
But that's not related. I just, giving yourself all these fun new abilities with the transform cards and making your card cheaper to flip, I thought was just a lot of fun.
I will admit, I do think that the characters themselves that we played from Season 2, I think had the most distinctive, interesting gimmicks to them, whereas the Street Fighter seemed a little bit more just like, this guy's like a little stronger, he hits faster, moves faster. Those had some weird stuff going on.
How would you say, like, if someone had no fighting games, none of these cards, and they see, Exceed,
BattleCon, Level 90,
and Pixel Tactics.
I think this game is a better casual entry. I think that BattleCon, because there's so many, and because I think there's a lot more analysis and real, like, as much as we said you need to know your decks, I think it's like doubled for BattleCon.
Yeah, there was I remember one of our very early games. When, we were just choosing characters, we didn't know that much. And I happened to choose someone who needed to be next to them, and you chose someone who was all about teleporting.
Yeah, so that kind of thing can happen, and could come up in this game as well, but I think BattleCon is really the one for like if you really want to dive in hardcore. This one, don't get me wrong, you can get plenty of depth here as well, but I think it's a little bit more accessible. And Pixel Tactics, that I think is actually different enough that it could live alongside. I think this really feels like a sister game to BattleCon to me.
I do think this is also better for the casual because, we started mentioning in our crits, and we decided to wait until the end, but being able to just buy 4 characters, I think, at a time is just a little bit nicer, especially when you're not so sure how far you're going to go.
Yeah, just pick up a small box. And of course, if you're a Street Fighter fan.
Oh, yeah. I thought to ignore that because that's not fair to BattleCon.
Right.
Unless you're like, oh, man, I loved Argent. I want to get everything that they're in.
Yeah, so I think we've said our piece about these games. We were very, very impressed by them. And honestly, I don't know, it shouldn't be much of a surprise. Brad Talton and Level 99, if there's anything they know how to do, it's these kinds of games.
Yeah.
So Exceed, check it out. It's available right now. And we really would like to hear from you about which seasons you like, which characters you think are the best, maybe some of the characters we didn't get to play as. What are your thoughts on the overall package? Talk to us in the comments right down below. You could also find us on Twitter, Instagram, etc. at Roll for Crit. Also, in the description, you can find out how to get there.
Also, look in the audience for fighting games. We may pop up now and then.
Yeah, oh yeah. We're back there. We're in that Punch-Out stage in Smash Brothers. So until we see you again, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this was a Roll for Crit review.
Hey, if you like what you saw, don't forget to subscribe and like this video for more excellent board game content.
Heck yeah!